Join us tonight to answer that question and much more. He sits on the Armed Services Committee in the Senate. He's also had classified briefings on this in the past, is Senator Kevin Cramer. Senator, thanks so much for joining us, sir. This stuff can get pretty complicated, so let's pretend tonight as you are. You're in people's living rooms right now. You're sitting down at the dinner table with, the average North Dakota family. One, why should they care about what's happening over in Turkey and northern Syria? And two, since you're on the Armed Services Committee, what's the most important thing you think they should know about the situation?
Yeah, the answer to the first question is a difficult one, right? Because one of the reasons Donald Trump won was because he promised to get us out of these, quote, endless wars, and that it really isn't America's role to be the policeman of the world, especially in areas where the conflict seems to not affect us. However, Chris, one of the reasons that our presence is so important in the Middle East is because ever since 9/11/2001, we've taken the fight to the terrorists rather than the terrorists coming to the United States, and we've been largely successful in doing that. Now, the enemy of my enemy is my friend has sort of been the low standard for alliances in the Middle East, and Turkey is sort of one of those allies, if you will, kind of a quasi-ally, sort of a situational ethic ally from time to time. But Syria is such an important land base in the Middle East because it creates a land bridge from Iran to our friends in Israel, of course. Turkey is a quasi-ally. Syria is in a civil war, as we know. It became the caliphate for ISIS, which, to Donald Trump's credit, and we have to always remember this, along with the Kurds, took that geographic caliphate out.
But Senator,
however, and this is another reason why Americans need to be concerned, 30,000 of the 70,000 refugees that are being held in Syria are expected to be ISIS advocates or even ISIS fighters. So we have to be concerned about what happens to those 30,000 ISIS folks if the Kurds and we're not there to contain them.
I agree. We'll get to that in a moment, but I think President Trump said earlier today many of these people are either European or have European passports. They can go back to Europe. Again, where I suggest that I think President Trump is playing chess here and doing a checkmate on Europe and Turkey, because you keep using sort of this quasi-ally of Turkey when they're part of NATO. I mean, again, was President Trump accurate by saying that, hey, is NATO becoming irrelevant? So let's walk through this, because you talk with the President Trump quite often. And what's the chess game here? What I mean specifically is that he had a call with President Erdogan from Turkey. I believe it was Sunday or earlier this week. Next thing you know, there's an announcement that President Erdogan's going to be in D.C. I think it's November 13th. Sounds to me like some kind of deal's been done. And the next thing you know, we pull out of Turkey and Syria. Turkey invades. Walk us through what you see. By the way, we also have now got a mutual defense agreement with Greece, which Turkey's been moving around on the Balkans. So what's the chess game that you see here?
So I don't know exactly what the chess game is, but I think you're onto something when you refer to NATO. And one of the great frustrations that President Trump has expressed, and rightfully so, is that our European allies, some of our closest allies in the world, certainly in the West, have not stepped up, whether it's NATO or, frankly, whether it's even in Syria. And so he's been frustrated that it's really been on the backs of the United States to control the refugee situation. And before I go much further, I want to remind Americans of this, too. We wanted to have these refugee camps and whatnot in Syria, or have it closer to where the refugees are from, rather than take them all into the United States. So there is an additional benefit to us doing that. But as you said, many of these 70,000 refugees, or many of the ISIS fighters, frankly, and sympathizers, come from European countries, but the European countries have not accepted those fighters back to have a trial, either a domestic trial in their own country, or a military trial in their own country. They've just sort of washed their hands of it, and the president's rightfully frustrated by that. Now, the Kurds are our allies, no question about it. They've fought side by side with us. Well, we did a lot of stuff through the air, including from the Minot Air Force Base, to wipe out the ISIS caliphate. It was the Turkish soldiers on the ground that did a lot of the hard work, shoulder to shoulder with Americans. So we owe them a great deal, but both the Kurds and Turkey are allies of different types. And people should also know, and because you asked what should they know, they should know that the president is committed to maintaining some difference or some separation between the invasion and the Kurdish people. So he has put very strong warnings on with Turkey and President Erdogan to make sure that they don't go outside of their lane and go too far and do what I think many expect, at least the Kurds expect, and that is to do an all-out assault on the Turkish or on the Kurdish people. So we've got some discipline built in. There's a close eye, of course, being watched. And also remember this, that while the United States removed those soldiers immediately in the zone, if you will, they're not far away, nor are a lot of our other assets far away. So if we were called upon and we felt it was in our best interest, we could certainly respond quickly. I do have some concerns, as do a number of other people, about the Kurds as our allies and the treatment that they're getting or that they feel they're getting, but we're not turning our backs completely on them.
So, Senator, a couple more things, and I'll move on to some other conversations as well. But sure. Do you then, yes or no, support President Trump pulling the special forces out of this area?
I'm fine with it right now based on what he has said since that day. I'm looking forward to getting a lot more information when I get back to Washington in the classified briefings that we will no doubt have next week. And then I'll have a better idea, Chris, of where all of our assets really are and how quickly they can respond. And then how closely we're watching. But also remember, we need to hear from our allies in Europe and NATO and certainly from the United Nations.
And allegedly they're going to do that tomorrow, but what's the delay? I mean, come on, you've got 7 civilians killed. I think President Trump's playing chess here. But so Senator Graham and Chris Van Hollen, another senator, have now put together this bill. I want to share with you some of it, see if you support this or not. According to a fact sheet, they would sanction any assets of a Turkish leader, including President Erdogan, would also target Turkey's energy sector, military, and sanctions against any foreign person who sells them that kind of stuff, their military as well, and also would prohibit Turkish leadership from traveling to the United States. Can you get on board with that?
Well, we'll see when I learn more. I've seen what you've just shared. I've received the sort of the outline of the resolution, and we'll see. I don't see anything in it that's unreasonable. The bill, as I understand it, the resolution, as I understand it, requires the administration to report to Congress every 90 days of certain aspects, and if they can do that, and they should be able to do that, then maybe maybe I could get on board. But I want to see more details. But on the surface and principally, I don't see a real big problem with it.
All right, Senator, 2 more things, sir, is that I want to play a quick clip for you. This is President Trump from last week, just before he was getting on Marine One, and then I'll ask you some questions about it on the other side.
Okay.
They should investigate the Bidens, because how does a company that's newly formed, and all these companies, if you look at, and by the way, likewise, China should start an investigation into the Bidens, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine. So I would say that President Zelensky, if it were me, I would recommend that they start an investigation into the Bidens, because nobody has any doubt that they weren't crooked. That was a crooked deal, 100%.
Senator Cramer, I don't know if you've seen this, but Fox News just came with a brand new poll tonight. They asked the question, is it appropriate for President Trump to ask foreign leaders to investigate rivals, political rivals? 66% said it's not appropriate. Do you think it's appropriate for President Trump to invite China and Ukraine to investigate a political rival?
Well, first of all, Chris, there's great integrity in sunshine. This is the President of the United States talking at an open news conference that the entire world is watching. It's not like a secret phone call on the bat phone to the red phone, just telling China that hey, why don't we have an investigation? Why don't you investigate these guys? There is great integrity and transparency. So I personally don't see it as a big problem, especially the way that he did. He's not ordering them. He's not negotiating with them. He's not even having a covert operation. He's just talking out loud, expressing his opinion out loud. Second of all, what's so wrong with other countries digging into corruption in their own country, especially when it affects our country? Certainly Joe Biden is a possible Democratic contender, although I doubt it. But he is, at least as of now, a candidate. But it's not Donald Trump's fault that the guy used to be the vice president of the United States and they used $1 billion American taxpayer dollars to to dangle over Ukraine's head while they to make sure that they withdrew or fired a prosecutor that was getting close to prosecuting Joe Biden's son. I mean, the fact that we would sit around and somehow rationalize that, but then criticize our president, who, by the way, released the entire transcript of the phone call, only to have Adam Schiff be proven a liar.
So just for clarity, you're okay that he asked the AG and Rudy Giuliani to go investigate a political rival?
Well, first of all, with regard to Rudy Giuliani, I read the transcript of the call. It was Lazinski that brought up Rudy Giuliani and brought up that relationship. With regard to the Attorney General being involved in corruption investigations, I mean, I'm pretty sure that the former Attorney General was involved in corruption investigations. I'm quite certain that the Attorney General before the current one absolved himself from corruption investigations. We saw how well that went. So it's entirely appropriate for the Attorney General of the United States to be looking into corruption of our government, and in any case, and in any situation where our government might have been in cahoots with another government. So again, this is all out in the open. This is not some sort of a covert operation, and I think it's got people baffled that Donald Trump is so transparent about all of this.
Well, and I think an important thing to note is you just heard the news yesterday that now Prosecutor Durham has actually expanded his look into the initiation of this Russia hoax, and so we'll see what that prevails as well. One more thing from the Fox News pollster is that in July of 2019, 42% of the people polled said that President Trump should be impeached. That now is at 51% saying that President Trump should be impeached and removed from office. What say you?
Well, I say let's see where the facts lead, but this is not a legitimate impeachment inquiry. This is unprecedented. This is a political, not just a political process, it is a partisan political process completely void of any due process. And in our system, you are entitled to due process. This is a circumstance where the accuser gets to remain anonymous and the accused gets to remain defenseless. It's unfair to the president. It's unfair to the presidency. It's an overreach by the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, and they ought to be ashamed of themselves. You know what they want, Chris? They want a fast prosecution before it unravels on them, just like the Mueller investigation did. That went so poorly for them. They were so embarrassed by it that this time around they've decided to try a man and declare him guilty before they even have the trial, before they even allow due process, before they allow witnesses, before they allow cross-examination or subpoenas by the accused or the accused's allies. And it's a grossly unfair process that is going to rip this country apart. And by the way, I think it's designed to do exactly that, Chris. It's designed to undermine the credibility of our country when we're on the international stage doing big trade deals, involved in these geopolitical issues around the world. And the Democrats would rather see America fail than Donald Trump succeed, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, and I will say, Senator, I think it's no mistake that Nancy Pelosi did this the day of the end of the UN General Assembly when President Trump had a lot of great things to share with the United States of America. One last thing, sir. It looks like people, maybe Lindsey Graham and Rudy G, watched our interview from last week. This isn't breaking news. I want to give you a chance to react to, because as you know, I'm saying this is about time. I haven't had this confirmed, but it says here, Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani says that he predicts that the Senate Judiciary Committee, i.e. Lindsey Graham, will call former President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden to testify before their panel about corruption in Ukraine. Should have happened months ago. What say you?
I'd rather have it happen at the end of the game when we win than at the beginning of the game when we just fire up the other side. As I've said to you before, dancing in the end zone when you lose 40-7 is a very shallow victory. So I trust Chairman Graham.
All right, we will see what happens. Senator Kevin Cramer, thank you for the time and the insight. We look forward to having you back on soon.